Welcome to the deep dive. We're all about, peeling back the layers on cultural icons, getting into the surprising stuff underneath, and today we're tackling a big one. A myth, really, that's been around forever. Tarzan. Now, when you picture Tarzan, you probably see the Hollywood guy, right? Leopard skin, loincloth, tan, that famous yell,
Hey.
swinging through the trees. Simple.
Right. But if you actually go back to the source, Edgar Rice Burroughs' original novel from 1912, Tarzan of the Apes, it's different. You find this character, John Clayton, Lord Greystoke. He's much more complex, troubling even. And honestly, he comes from a place of real desperation. He's an icon, sure, but maybe one born out of panic as much as pulp fantasy, anxiety about history, about where America was heading.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to look at how this character even came to be. We'll dig into the book itself, but also, crucially, into Burroughs' own life, which was pretty chaotic back then.
Yeah.
And we'll look at the anxieties of the time in America, early 20th century, this sense of crisis and masculinity, the explosion of cities, how all that fed into this ultimate male fantasy figure.
Yeah, exactly. We're using excerpts from the novel, biographical stuff on Burroughs, and some critical analysis looking specifically at that period, 1911, 1912, and his context in Chicago from, say, 1875 up to then.
Right. And it's really important to get this first. Tarzan wasn't cooked up by some successful author living the good life.
Not at all. This story was absolutely forged in failure.
Okay, let's get into that.
Yeah.
You hear about writers struggling? Sure. But Burroughs before Tarzan. I mean, it wasn't just struggle. It was like a highlight reel of failed careers. It's almost funny if it weren't so desperate.
That's really the core context, isn't it? He wasn't aiming for literary immortality. He was trying to pay the bills. The biographical sources, they lay it all out. Just one financial disaster after another leading up to 1911. And you have to think about the psychological impact. Here's a guy from a privileged background failing repeatedly at these sort of, standard masculine jobs.
The list is something else. Tried sifting for gold in Idaho. The rugged prospector thing. Failed. Ran a stationery store. More stable, right? Nope. Failed too. Worked as a railroad cop. Sold candy. Sold light bulbs. And then, really hitting bottom, he was selling what the sources straight up call a snake oil cure for alcoholism.
Wow, yeah. Just throwing anything at the wall, hoping something would stick, and nothing did. So writing fiction, starting around 1911, it was literally the last resort. He was pawning his stuff, even his wife's jewelry, just to get food for the family. When he wrote that first story, Under the Moons of Mars, for the All-Story magazine, he wasn't dreaming of literary prizes. He was thinking about the $400 check.
So that desperation, that need to just escape into a world where he couldn't fail, that's the fuel for these incredibly imaginative stories.
Exactly. It's pure escapism, born from necessity.
Well, what really sharpens that desperation is where he came from. He wasn't born into poverty.
No, not at all. The sources confirm, born 1875, Chicago, into a genuinely well-off family. His father was a former Union Army major, owned a distillery, later a battery company, real solid middle class, even upper middle class prosperity, inherited status.
But his youth shows this rebellious streak, maybe. Didn't quite fit the mold.
Right. He attended Phillips Academy, but didn't last. Did better at Michigan Military Academy. Surprisingly good at Greek and Latin, actually. Shows he had the intellect. But what did he really care about? Writing and drawing for the school paper. And crucially, horseback riding. Always drawn to the physical, the active, maybe less so the purely academic.
Then you see this longing for old-school adventure, the kind that civilization seemed to be snuffing out. He joined the Army in 1896. What was the dream?
Fighting Apaches in Arizona. The romantic frontier ideal.
But it only lasted 10 months. Why so short?
Well, the reality didn't match the dream. Sources say poor health, but also just sheer boredom. Peacetime army life, bureaucracy. It wasn't the rugged conflict he craved. He apparently pleaded to get discharged.
Couldn't handle the lack of action.
Pretty much. And his desire for that kind of defining conflict was so strong that in 1898, he tried to join Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, the ultimate expression of American manhood at the time.
Yeah.
Rejected. Regiment was over-enlisted. So, again, the modern world is kind of shutting him out from these paths to proving himself.
So he's actively looking for a way to prove his manhood, maybe find some kind of authentic crisis, and all he's getting is desk jobs and rejection slips.
And snake oil.
Right, and snake oil. This whole quest for authentic masculinity, it seems absolutely central to why Tarzan had to be invented.
And it's tied directly to the place he lived in and apparently really disliked, Chicago. Burroughs himself said he hated cities, hated crowds, and that feeling pushed him to write Tarzan.
Why Chicago, though? What was it about that specific city that made it feel so, well, monstrous to him.
Well, think about Chicago between 1875 and 1900. It was just exploding. Unbelievable industrial growth, huge waves of immigration, and intense, often violent labor conflict, all crammed together. One source we looked at described it as first in violence, deepest in dirt, lawless, unlovely, ill-smelling, irreverent, new. That paints a picture, doesn't it?
Definitely. And for someone like Burroughs from that established sort of WASP background, this wasn't necessarily seen as progress. It was chaos, degradation maybe.
There was a real fear, yeah, a visceral anxiety among those established Americans that the huge influx of immigrants, especially from Eastern and Southern Europe, often seen as, radicals or just un-American, was eroding the country's core values.
And it wasn't just abstract fear. There was real violence.
Absolutely. Burroughs' own father was an official witness at the executions after the Haymarket riot in 1886. That event shook Chicago, polarized everyone. It would have shaped young Burroughs' view of civilization as being inherently unstable, maybe even corrupt and violent underneath.
Okay, fast forward 7 years, 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. This sounds like it perfectly crystallized that whole civilization versus savagery anxiety.
Oh, completely. It was like a physical map of that division. On one side, you had the White City, gleaming neoclassical buildings celebrating American technology, commerce, industry. Burroughs' father's battery company even had a display there. It was the image of the clean, orderly, white-dominated future.
And then the flip side. The Midway Plaisance.
The Midway.
Yeah.
That was intentionally designed to showcase what was considered the barbarism of non-European peoples. The sources list exhibits of Samoans, Egyptians, Turks, American Indians, all brought over and put on display, essentially.
Like living exhibits.
Pretty much. The Chicago Tribune at the time actually wrote that the Midway allowed the scientific mind to, and I'm quoting here, descend the spiral of evolution, tracing humanity in its highest phases down almost to its animalistic origins.
Wow. That's blunt. Framing entire cultures as lower rungs on the evolutionary ladder right next door to the pinnacle of American tech in the White City.
Exactly. And here's the connection. Edgar Rice Burroughs, 18 years old, is right there experiencing this firsthand.
What was he doing there?
Driving an electric car, one powered by his father's batteries, a symbol of that White City progress around the Midway. He's literally navigating between the exhibits of so-called primitive peoples and watching Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show, which itself romanticized the idea of the noble savage and the vanishing frontier.
So he's absorbing this entire visual and cultural language. The clean, powerful White City versus the exotic, maybe dangerous, but definitely lower Midway.
Precisely. It gives him the raw material, doesn't it? The template for a character who could somehow embody both. The physical prowess of the savage combined with the innate intelligence and superiority of the civilized white man. Tarzan is almost born out of the Midway Plaisance, in a way.
Okay, so Burroughs has this deep-seated need to create an ideal man. Someone who escapes the corruption, the weakness he sees in city life, and reclaims this powerful physical masculinity. And that need drives the whole setup of the story, the Greystoke tragedy.
And it's interesting, this tragedy doesn't just happen by accident, like a shipwreck out of nowhere. It starts with a specific political mission. John Clayton, Lord Greystoke, and his young wife, Lady Alice Rutherford, they aren't on a vacation cruise. He's been sent by the British government on official duty.
A duty that puts them right into the thick of the biggest colonial scandal of the era.
Exactly. Lord Greystoke's job is to investigate the awful treatment, basically slavery, of black British subjects by the army of another European power. The novel hints strongly at the use of military force to compel labor, collecting ivory and rubber.
Which is a clear nod to King Leopold II's horrific regime in the Congo Free State, right? Millions died there under brutal forced labor.
Undeniably. Burroughs is putting his English aristocrat right into that context. It's subtle, maybe, but it suggests that even the good Europeans, the nobility trying to uphold standards, are caught up in or trying to clean up the mess of colonial exploitation. Though, spoiler alert, they don't escape its violence.
No, they definitely don't.
Yeah.
Their transport is the Fualda, this ship crewed by, as the book calls them, the off-scourings of the sea-unhanged murderers and cutthroats. So the danger isn't just the jungle, it's the dregs of civilization they bring with them.
Right. And Lord Greystoke, being the proper gentleman, he's disgusted by the captain's brutality towards the crew, using weapons like a belaying pin to keep order. Clayton tries to stay neutral when he hears whispers of mutiny, but Lady Alice, she's got this very rigid sense of duty, insists, duty's duty, John. She kind of pushes him to intervene.
And that intervention backfires, doesn't it? He warns the captain, gets rebuffed. Then the mutiny happens anyway, led by this guy, Black Michael, whose life Clayton had actually saved earlier.
Yeah, the irony. So Michael takes over, but he's worried. He can't just sail into a civilized port having murdered a British official. So his solution, maroon the Claytons on this remote stretch of African coast, near Angola, the book says.
Stranded, not by a storm, but by human violence and betrayal.
And that moment they land, it's a huge psychological shift. Lady Alice is terrified, sees only the horrors lying in wait. But Lord Greystoke, he flips a switch. The book calls it a man's philosophy.
What does that mean?
He basically says, okay, stop panicking. We have to work. We have to survive. We have to wait. And he even connects it to their ancestry, saying their noble forefathers faced the same problems, possibly in these same primeval forests. It's like he sees it as a return to some fundamental aristocratic strength, not just a disaster.
So they start building the tree platform and the famous cabin, a little piece of England with a reinforced door and window trying to hold back the wilderness.
It's their fortress of civilization. But the jungle keeps pressing in, and it leads to this really traumatic event for Lady Alice. Remember, she started as this very proper Victorian lady. Now she's forced into this life or death situation. A huge ape, a bull ape weighing 300 pounds, attacks her husband.
And she saves him.
She grabs a rifle and shoots it dead. An incredible act of courage, completely out of character for who she was.
But it breaks her.
Completely. The sources say the shock leaves her mentally scarred, impaired. Her only connection to reality, or maybe her escape from it, is her baby son. She finds joy and happiness with him, but she seems to think she's still back in London, lost in this delusion.
It's heartbreaking, and she doesn't recover.
No. About a year after the baby's born, she just dies. Quietly. Leaving John Clayton completely alone with this infant, his last act is to write in his diary. And it's poignant. He writes it in French, the language of high society, not English, just lamenting, "My little son is crying for nourishment. Oh, Alice, Alice, what shall I do?" Total helplessness at the end of the line for the civilized man.
And almost immediately, the jungle provides an answer. A very different kind of answer.
Right on cue. As Clayton despairs, the ape world is having its own tragedy. Kerchak, the ape king, is in a rage, kills one of the female apes, and Kala, another female ape, is fleeing his fury. In the chaos, she drops her own infant ape from a tree. It dies, just a wee, mangled form.
So 2 mothers lose their infants almost simultaneously. 1 human, 1 ape.
Exactly. Which sets up this immediate, powerful motivation for what happens next. Kerchak and the ape tribe stumble upon the Claytons' cabin. They break in. Kerchak, still enraged, moves towards the human baby in the cradle. But Kala, fresh off her own loss, driven by that raw maternal grief, she snatches the human baby. She escapes with him up into the trees, claiming him.
And they name him Tarzan, which means...
white skin in the ape language, a constant reminder of his difference.
But the tribe is okay with this, just accepting a human baby.
Oh, not at all. Tublat, Kayla's mate, his name means broken nose, gives you an idea he immediately objects, tells Kerchak to make Kayla give up the white skin, argues he'll never be a real ape, just a weak burden.
But Kayla refuses.
Fiercely. She threatens to leave the tribe altogether if they take the baby from her. And apparently in ape society that threat holds weight. It respects that intense maternal bond, or maybe just her individual will. So they back down. Tarzan gets to live, protected by his grieving ape mother, the ultimate outsider from day one.
So now we have the ultimate experiment, right? Nature versus nurture turned up to 11. This boy, biologically an English lord, raised solely by apes, how does he even begin to figure out who or what he is?
Well, it's a long, slow process. And it starts with realizing just how different he is. The book says he's almost 10 before it really hits him that he's hairless. He sees it as a source of intense shame, actually. Compares his smooth skin to a low snake. It's his peers, the apes, who make him feel freakish, which is fascinating.
And that feeling pushes him towards the only clue to his origins.
Well,
Common.
it becomes this place of mystery and fascination for him. He keeps going back. Eventually, he figures out how to get the door open. Inside, he finds the skeletons of his parents and the original ape infant in the cradle. But interestingly, he doesn't seem to have much emotional reaction to them. They're just remains. His connection is to the apes. What really grabs him is the cupboard full of books.
Okay, this is the part that always blows my mind.
Yeah.
How does he teach himself to read? With absolutely no context, no one to explain anything?
It's presented as this incredible feat of pure deduction. He finds a children's alphabet primer, you know, the kind with pictures. A is for Archer, B is for boy. At first, he just sees the letters as weird little shapes, like strange kind of bugs, because they don't have eyes or mouths like animals do.
But then he starts noticing patterns.
Exactly. He sees the same bugs appear under the same pictures repeatedly. Like under the picture of what he thinks is a little ape, he always sees BOY. He starts to connect the shapes to the image, then maybe to the sounds the apes make. It's not fully explained, but it's this immense cognitive leap. He's cracking a code completely alone.
Without a teacher, without any concept of written language. It's almost unbelievable.
The book emphasizes how long and hard it was. It says by 15, he sort of recognized the combinations, could maybe sound things out. But it wasn't until he was 17 that he had the big breakthrough. He understood the true and wonderful purpose of the little bugs, that they carried meaning, knowledge, stories.
And finding his father's hunting knife helps?
No. Oh, right. The knife is crucial, but the dictionary is the real key for his intellectual leap. He finds this big illustrated dictionary near his father's skeleton. He uses the pictures in the dictionary to connect the words he's deciphered to the world around him. And this is where you get these categories. He sees the word MAN next to a picture of a human. He sees APE next to an ape. SABOR next to LIONESS.
So the books give him his species identity. He realizes, I am MAN, they are APES.
Precisely. And that knowledge, that higher intelligence derived from the books, is what Burroughs suggests makes him ultimately superior, destined to be Lord of the Jungle.
And this intellectual breakthrough leads directly to a physical one.
Immediately. His first major test as man is fighting Bolgani, this huge, dominant gorilla. He uses the hunting knife, the tool from the civilized world, and wins. But it's brutal. He gets terribly injured, 3 broken ribs, his arm almost torn off, barely misses severing his jugular. It establishes his physical courage and skill, using intellect and a tool to beat brute strength.
So he proves himself physically. But the book then takes his turn, right, into the philosophy of killing.
Yeah, it's quite a stark passage. Burroughs lays out this idea about Tarzan's motives for killing. He writes, and this is almost a direct quote, that Tarzan killed mostly for food, but being a man, he sometimes killed for pleasure, a thing which no other animal does.
Wait. Being a man means he sometimes killed for pleasure. That's the defining trait.
That's what Burroughs writes. For it has remained for man alone among all creatures to kill senselessly and wantonly for the mere pleasure of inflicting suffering and death.
That's incredibly dark. So the very thing that separates him from the animals, his humanity, includes this capacity for wanton, joyful killing. That's the pinnacle.
It's a shocking statement, isn't it? A deep critique embedded in this adventure story. You have to remember the time Burroughs was writing in. The Gilded Age, industrial barons, ruthless competition, colonial exploitation. Maybe he saw that senseless killing as the dark heart of civilization itself.
And it connects to that whole great white hunter phenomenon that was so popular then. Teddy Roosevelt's African Safari, for instance. Wasn't that just a few years before this book? Massive numbers of animals killed, very publicly celebrated.
Exactly. Roosevelt and his son Kermit killed something like 500 big game animals, including 17 lions. It was presented as this peak of masculine, civilized adventure. Tarzan adopts that very ritual. After killing Bolgani, he performs the hunter's triumphant gesture, placing his foot on the neck of the kill, letting out this primal victory cry. He embraces that aspect of manhood.
And this leads to the dum-dum ritual.
Right, the dum-dum. It's described as this wild, frenzied dance the apes do after a kill, beating on earthen drums, pure primal release, ecstatic violence almost.
And Burroughs takes it even further, doesn't he? He connects this jungle ritual directly to civilization.
He does. He explicitly suggests that from this primitive function arose all the forms and ceremonials of modern church and state. Seriously. He's saying that our most revered institutions, government ceremonies, religious rituals, are just cleaned-up versions of apes dancing around a kill.
That's the implication. It's a radical leveling. He's stripping away the pretensions of sophisticated society and saying, underneath it all, it's still the dum-dum, still the primal urge. It's a profound indictment of the civilization he supposedly fled.
So Burroughs has built his ideal man, master of the jungle, intellectually awakened through books, embodying this potent, if disturbing mix of primitive strength and inherent madness. Now, before Tarzan crashes back into the civilized world, let's touch on why this figure, this master savage, would have resonated so strongly back in 1912 America.
Oh, it capped right into that anxiety we talked about, the crisis of masculinity. There was this widespread fear that modern life, city life, office jobs were making men soft, turning robust, self-reliant boys into, the quote was, flat-chested cigarette smokers.
Yeah, I remember that quote, a real panic about losing manliness.
Definitely. And the perceived solution was to kind of rewild the youth, to bring back the primitive, which led to things like the Boy Scouts.
Right.
And other movements before them.
Exactly. You had Ernest Thompson Seton founding the Woodcraft Indians in 1902, Daniel Carter Beard's Sons of Daniel Boone. These groups were all about getting boys back to nature, teaching them outdoor skills, toughening them up. The idea was that experiencing a bit of the wild could inoculate them against the degeneracy of modern life.
Inoculate them. Like a vaccine against weakness.
Sort of, yeah. Influential educators like G. Stanley Hall were actually promoting this. He argued that children were naturally in a primitive stage and that embracing those savage instincts was healthy. He even told teachers to read kids old bloody stories to toughen them up.
Wow. So Tarzan, who actually lived that bloody primitive life and came out on
Right.
top, he's like the ultimate fantasy fulfillment of that whole educational theory. The perfect antidote.
Precisely. He's the proof of concept in fictional form.
But Tarzan's first real direct encounter with other humans isn't exactly heroic. It's driven by revenge, isn't it?
It is. It starts with a deep personal loss. Kala, his ape mother, the only mother he's ever known, is killed. Shot with a poisoned arrow by a black warrior named Kulonga, who's part of Mbanga's tribe described in the book as cannibals.
So Tarzan hunts him down?
Yes, and the scene highlights Tarzan's superior skills. His woodcraft, his ability to read the signs of the jungle are shown to be far better than the native humans. He tracks Kulonga, catches him, strangles him with his rope, that lariat he learned to use, and then finishes him with his father's hunting knife. The text is blunt. Kala was avenged. Pure, direct vengeance.
But then comes a moment of hesitation, a moral choice.
Right. After the kill, he examines Kulonga's body. He takes his weapons, his adornments, knife, belt, copper anklet as trophies. Standard warrior behavior, maybe. But then he considers eating the body, and he's hit with this wave of nausea.
Why? He's lived among apes. Killing and eating are natural.
Because of the books. This is where his self-education kicks in explicitly. He recoils from cannibalism because, as he reasons, his books taught him he was a man, and he simply did not know if men eat men. The abstract knowledge gained from reading overrides his environmental conditioning. It sets a moral boundary learned from print, not experience.
And that reinforces this idea of his inherent, maybe racially determined difference.
It certainly seems to function that way in the narrative. His rejection of cannibalism marks him as distinct from and implicitly superior to the native tribe.
And his observations of the tribe reinforce that further.
Yes. He later witnesses Mbanga's tribe torturing a captive from another village. The description is graphic, tearing at his living flesh with teeth and hands. Tarzan watches this and concludes that these men are no more civilized than the apes, no less cruel than Sabor, the lioness. He even notes that among the jungle animals he knows, only Sheeta the leopard seemed to torture its prey for pleasure.
So the implication is that these native humans are not only savage like the apes, but maybe even crueler, more deliberately cruel than most animals.
That's the comparison the text draws. It aligns unfortunately well with the racist evolutionary hierarchies prevalent at the time, suggesting that civilization isn't just learned behavior, but perhaps an innate potential tied to race. A potential Tarzan accesses through his books despite his upbringing.
Okay, so he's established his own moral code, distinct from apes and these specific humans. Then finally, white civilization arrives. The ship, the arrow.
Right. Carrying Professor Porter, his assistant Mr. Philander, Porter's daughter Jane, and Tarzan's own cousin, William Cecil Clayton, though Tarzan doesn't know that yet.
And Tarzan observes these white people. Does he see them as inherently better?
Not immediately. One of the first things he witnesses is more betrayal and violence among the white men. He sees one of them, Snipes, described as a little mean-faced man, shoot another, the giant king, in the back during the mutiny on the Arrow.
So, same pattern as his parents' fate. White civilization brings its own internal rot.
Exactly. It immediately undermines any simple idea that white skin equals inherent nobility or goodness in practice.
But then he sees Jane.
Ah, yes, Jane Porter. That changes everything for him. The description is immediate, overwhelming. The most wonderful sight of all was the face of the beautiful white girl. She instantly becomes the idealized symbol of the civilization he's only read about, the missing piece.
But their first significant interaction isn't exactly tea and conversation.
No, it's pure jungle drama. Turquoise, this huge, powerful ape who's challenged Tarzan before, abducts Jane. He intends to make her the first of his new household.
So Tarzan has to rescue her.
He does. And Jane witnesses this incredible, terrifying battle. The book describes it vividly, the primordial ape battle with the primeval man for possession of a woman for her.
And when Tarzan wins, kills Turkaz, Jane's reaction is intense.
Overwhelmingly so. She sees this magnificent, powerful man-beast who just saved her, and she feels this immediate, uncontrollable pull towards him. Love, the book calls it, but a very primal kind. The text says the veil of centuries of civilization and culture was swept from the blurred vision. She experiences what Burroughs calls a temporary mental reversion to type.
A reversion to type, meaning?
Meaning her civilized upbringing, her rationality just vanishes for a moment. She's reacting purely on instinct, drawn to the raw power, the masculinity, the sheer animal magnetism of Tarzan. Burroughs seems to suggest this primal core exists within the civilized woman, just waiting for the right primeval man to unlock it. It's a very physical, almost dangerously sexual attraction.
Okay, so Tarzan has proven his physical dominance. He's even evoked this incredibly primal response in Jane, the civilized woman. Now, driven by this connection to her, he needs to bridge the gap, right? Engage with her world.
Exactly. And his first instinct is practical, protective. He needs to help her and her father. His mind goes to the treasure chest he saw the mutineers from the Arrowberry.
The one Professor Porter needs.
Right. Tarzan digs it up. But it's this massive chest bound with iron. He, even with his strength, can't get it open. So he does the next best thing he can think of. He drags it to the Dum-Dum clearing, the sacred space of the apes, and buries it again there for safekeeping.
He doesn't even know what's in it, does he? Or why it's important.
Not yet. He only figures that out by reading something Jane left behind, a letter she wrote to her friend, Hazel Strong. In the letter, Jane explains everything. The chest holds a huge fortune, doubloons and pieces of eight. Professor Porter is deeply in debt, and this other guy, Robert Candler, is basically trying to blackmail Jane into marrying him by holding the debt over her father's head.
So Tarzan learns about money, debt, social pressure, marriage arrangements, the complex mechanics of civilization, all from reading a letter.
Yes. The written word is his constant key to understanding this alien world. And now he has a concrete goal. Get the treasure, save Jane from this forced marriage. He needs to master civilization not just for himself, but for her.
And his civilizing process gets a huge boost when he encounters the Frenchman, D'Arnot.
Paul D'Arnot, yes. A French naval lieutenant who gets wounded by Mubonga's warriors. Tarzan finds him, protects him, nurses him back to health.
But they can't talk to each other at first, right? Tarzan doesn't speak French, D'Arnot doesn't speak ape.
Correct. So how do they communicate? Tarzan uses his literacy. He scratches notes on pieces of bark. His first written message to another human is something like, "I speak only the language of my tribe, the great apes. This is the first time I have spoken with another of my kind through written words." It again emphasizes that his connection to humanity initially comes through reading and writing, not speaking.
And D'Arnot then becomes his tutor.
His intensive tutor. D'Arnot teaches him French, teaches him European manners, etiquette, how to dress, how to behave in society. He essentially gives Tarzan a crash course in being a civilized gentleman. The transformation is depicted as remarkably fast. Soon Tarzan is presented in immaculate white ducks, able to laugh and chat socially. He learns the performance of civilization.
But is it just a performance? Does he fully buy into it?
That's the interesting nuance. The book makes a point of saying that even though he could play the part perfectly, inwardly he hated the knife and fork, hated the constraints, the trivialities of civilized life. It suggests the core savage self, the preference for directness and simplicity, remains untouched beneath the polished surface.
So armed with language, manners, and eventually the treasure which gets converted into a modern letter of credit for a huge sum, $241,000, he follows Jane. Where does he catch up with her?
Back in America. Wisconsin, I think, is where he finally finds her, just in time to intervene and stop her from marrying Robert Candler to pay off her father's debt. He uses the treasure money to free her from that obligation. He's mastered the financial and social game.
He's basically achieved everything. He's conquered the jungle, learned the language, navigated society, secured wealth. And then comes the final piece, the proof of his true identity.
Yes, the confirmation from D'Arnot, who has stayed behind and managed to access John Clayton's diary left in the cabin.
The one written in French.
Right. And in the diary, there were apparently infant fingerprints smudged on the pages. D'Arnot manages to get these compared with Tarzan's fingerprints, and he sends a cable. "Fingerprints prove you Greystoke. Congratulations, D'Arnot."
Scientific proof. Using modern forensics, it confirms he is, without a doubt, John Clayton, Lord Greystoke, the true heir.
He has it all. The name, the title, the estates, the lineage confirmed by science.
And the situation is set up perfectly. His cousin, William Cecil Clayton, the guy who currently thinks he's Lord Greystoke, is about to marry Jane. Tarzan has the power to expose him, claim everything that's rightfully his, including, presumably, Jane.
It's the ultimate moment of triumph, ready to be claimed.
But he doesn't.
He doesn't. In the final confrontation, when William Clayton inevitably asks him about his origins, how he ended up in Africa, Tarzan lies, completely renounces his identity. He says, "I was born there in the jungle, my mother was an ape, and of course she couldn't tell me much about it. I never knew who my father was."
Why? After everything, why throw it all away? Why let the cousin keep the title and marry Jane?
It's presented as the ultimate act of noblesse oblige, the highest form of aristocratic self-sacrifice. He knows Jane is marrying Clayton, believing him to be the true Lord Greystoke. To reveal the truth now would humiliate Clayton, and more importantly, potentially compromise Jane's honor or happiness in his eyes.
So he sacrifices his entire identity, his birthright, his fortune, his name, for what he perceives to be her well-being and social standing. The savage performs the most civilized act imaginable.
That's the interpretation, yes. It's a profound, almost Christ-like renunciation.
But the irony is, it doesn't actually win him Jane.
No. The final crushing irony is that even after this incredible sacrifice, Jane still chooses to marry William Cecil Clayton.
Why? What's her reasoning in the end?
Well, the narrative explains her thinking. She reflects on that intense primal attraction she felt for Tarzan in the jungle, that mental reversion to type, and she concludes it was just that a temporary lapse, a dangerous primitive impulse. She decides that her training, environment, and heredity had all combined to teach her to reason even in matters of the heart.
So she consciously chooses reason, civilization, safety, the known quantity of the English lord, even if he's the wrong one, though she doesn't know that, over the unpredictable power and passion of the ape man.
Exactly. She essentially validates the civilized worldview, choosing the constructed identity of her upbringing over the raw, natural force that Tarzan represents. Hashtag Maytag outro.
So let's wrap this up. This deep dive really took us from Tarzan the pop culture icon back to his roots. A character born from an author's personal desperation, Edgar Rice Burroughs, trying to make sense of, and maybe escape from, this crisis of masculinity and civilization he saw all around him in early 20th century America.
Yeah, it's quite a journey. Burroughs creates this figure who achieves absolute mastery over the jungle, over language, over his own body, over the rules of civilization. He even gets scientific proof of his noble bloodline.
Everything you could possibly want.
Right. Only to have him consciously choose to throw away the ultimate prize, his title, his identity, out of a sense of noble sacrifice for the woman he loves.
A woman who, in the end, rejects the very primal power that drew her to him in the first place. She chooses the safe, civilized option.
The irony is just layered on thick, isn't it? He becomes the perfect, civilized gentleman in his actions, specifically in his renunciation, yet she chooses the man who merely inherited the title, not the one who earned mastery over both worlds. She essentially chooses the simulation over the real thing, because the real thing is too, well, real, too primal.
It really leaves you thinking, all that struggle, all that becoming, for what? It brings us back to that central question running through the whole story, maybe through all of Burroughs' work. When you get past the basic struggle for survival, when you've technically won the game, what defines who you really are? Is it your bloodline, your inherent nature? Is it the intellect you develop, the things you learn? Or is it, like Jane decided, more about the environment you were raised in, the rules you choose to accept, the identity you construct for yourself?
Where do you truly belong? In the jungle, in the drawing room, or somewhere else entirely? That's the question Tarzan leaves hanging, isn't it?